She is a food and lifestyle writer and a cooking instructor, and is also the owner of Annabel Cohen Cooks Detroit. We are pleased to be joined by Annabel Cohen, now on the Oakland County Megacast. Annabel, thank you for being with us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. How are you? How have you been throughout the pandemic?
I'm good. I'm good. The pandemic, as a caterer, put the slam the brakes onto catering events, and I think that's what we're here to talk about today. And what has it's turned everybody into great cooks. Everyone's baking. They said if you haven't had banana bread, you haven't. If you haven't made banana bread, you haven't gone through the COVID. It's really amazing how everyone has become so much more comfortable cooking, not just for their families, but for intimate gatherings as well.
So, Annabelle, now that the restrictions are lightening up a little bit more, are you
Yeah.
having people call you to come in and cater some of those small events or maybe even to give cooking
Yeah,
lessons?
both. I've done Zoom cooking classes. I've done some for charity. I've done some for myself. I've been catering so many weddings, like one or two weddings a weekend, which is not normally it's not my forte because as an off-premise caterer, I I do most events in people's homes or in certain venues, but a lot of venues don't allow outside caterers to cater. So instead, if people are bringing their 200 people weddings and bringing them home and having backyard under a tent for 20 people. So I've picked up a lot of that kind of business, and it's so nice to be part of people's lifestyle, or sorry, life cycle events.
So, during all of this, what's your top 3 cooking tips?
Top three cooking tips. Um, don't over shop. If A lot of people are having a hard time going to the supermarkets these days, so they're bringing things in, and sometimes they bring in a lot. So it's for cooking can get really really boring. I've been watching these amazing chefs, and they're talking about they can't even look at their own food anymore, and that's what happens when you cook a lot. But um, but if you buy small quantities of foods, recipes now instead of being for 6 and 8 people, my recipes are now all for 1 or 2 people, and so you don't have to buy very much. It gets very very boring to eat the same food every day. Some people love leftovers. I'm not a leftover gal, so my first cooking tip would be not to overbuy because we tend to for cooking we might as well cook a lot. That's The less you cook, the more you'll enjoy cooking, believe it or not, because you'll be cooking more often, but not recipes that are super, super long or involved with a million ingredients.
Annabel Cohen with
Number
us on.
two,
Oh, go for it.
okay, okay. The second one is, and I say this in all my cooking classes. I once read a cookbook review that went something like this: Anybody who follows the recipe the way it's written gets what they deserve. And it's so perfect. You have to sort of be active in your cooking. Baking is a little bit different. It's hard to, you can't riff very much when you're baking a cake because you're putting a liquid in the oven and you're hoping it comes out as a solid, but not too solid. But cooking, you have to be very, very active in your cooking. For example, my red wine vinegar may not taste the same as your red wine vinegar. Different manufacturer, different acidity, different strength. So you have to kind of cook as you go along. Um, if you use a recipe as a guide, any recipe really only is a guide. It's not meant to be followed absolutely exactly, even though a lot of people do. And then they end up with something that they call a boring, the soup is boring or is bland. Well, the cure to blandness is salt or a little bit of lemon juice or some cayenne pepper. Basically, the second tip is to not follow the recipe exactly as it's written. Uh, don't vary too far, but definitely taste and do things um, to your own specific tastes. My third tip, since you're asking me for my top three, is to um, use every once in a while just have a raw dinner, whether that's a salad with lots of chopped vegetables, with fresh fruit at the end. Especially in the summer, it's been so hot. Although amazingly today I'm talking to you and it's nice and cool. But when you eat a lot of raw things, you're not firing up the stove. You're not um, heating up the oven. You're not heating up your house, and you're also changing your way of eating. a lot of people who aren't eating out as much as they used to would have a salad for lunch, but they don't think of necessarily having a salad for dinner. And so my third tip would be to do some raw meals, change it up a little bit, not have everything hot or even cooked. And I think you'll have a good time in your kitchen. I think people are having a good time in their kitchen.
Annabel Cohen with us on the Oakland County Megacast. She is the owner of Annabel Cohen Cooks Detroit and is also a food and lifestyle writer and a cooking instructor. So as people are continuing to cook at home and they're not eating out as much, they're not necessarily ordering in as much as maybe they were before the pandemic, experimentation and trial and error is so critical to developing skills in the kitchen. As you had mentioned, saying following those recipes as a guide instead of a dead set roadmap is the way to go. What should people do as they're getting through that process to trial and error, to experiment a little bit? What steps should they take to get started in that so that they're not jumping in too far and making a mistake that maybe will not be very pleasant for their palate, but are able to engage in that creativity a little bit?
Well, the first thing I tell people is, if you think you screwed something up, don't throw it away. Just because it's supposed to be chocolate mousse and it doesn't settle doesn't mean it can't be a chocolate sauce that you serve over ice cream. This is almost the same, another advice that people give when they do knitting. If you make a mistake, stop right there. Don't continue and have to rip something out. The only problem that really can't be fixed when you're cooking is if you burn something, because a burn smell goes right into the food, and you can try hiding it a million different ways. But if you burn the rice, throw it out and start again. However, if you are making another dish and it's not completely cooked through, of course you can always cook it more. If your roast doesn't taste very good or it's too stringy, chop it up and put some barbecue sauce on it and make whole barbecue beef sandwiches. I guess just because you think something's ruined, it may not be ruined forever. The recipe you followed may not be exactly right, but you can always transform other foods into something else. For example, if you make your soup way too salty, divide it in half, add a bunch of vegetables or other ingredients, pasta, potatoes, whatever you want, into one half. Freeze the other half and use the other half another time. Because it's hard to take salt. You can't take salt out of food, but you'll have to dilute it or stretch it other ways to make it less salty. But it doesn't mean it goes into the garbage can at that point.
Annabel Cohen with us. She is the owner of Annabel Cohen Cooks Detroit, a food and lifestyle writer, as well as a cooking instructor with us on the Oakland County Megacast. So much great advice she's given to our audience so far about continuing to cook through the remainder of this pandemic and even beyond. Annabel, as we're going forward, if people have more questions or are looking for some advice or looking to take some classes, how can they find more information?
Well, if you go to my, just call me. I have my phone numbers on my website. It's also on my Facebook page. If you can get 8 people together, we can do a hands-on cooking class from afar. They cost about as much as you would pay if you went to Sur La Table or to Williams-Sonoma. So the classes are not cheap when they're hands-on. But if you get a bunch of people together, and I've been doing this a lot, we can do a cooking class that's a lot less expensive with Zooming, where everybody can sort of watch me cook. You don't get to eat it at the end, but you get a lot of ideas. I just did one recently for charity where I did 10 fast and fabulous appetizers. In 1.5 hours, we did 10 appetizers. But that was just me cooking and people watching. If you want to do a cooking class, which takes about 2.5 to 3 hours, basically I send you ingredient lists ahead of time, and you buy the ingredients and we cook together. I get to watch what you're doing. You get to watch what I'm doing. I can answer your questions right then and there. And in the end, we all eat in our own places, our own homes. But, we can do social distancing cooking classes all together as well. I've been doing cooking classes out of my house. And I have a nice big counter, and that works out well to have a few people. But the Zoom cooking classes are really, really a lot of fun. It's just like your Zoom meetings or your Zoom family occasions, and you learn too. And I always have good tips, because basically you can find any recipe you want on the internet. but there are certain tips and shortcuts that are fun to learn.
Annabelle, what permanent changes do you think is going to come out of this for the catering business?
It's interesting because we were getting away from packaging. It used to be that the less packaging, the better. And now everything is more packaged, including catering foods. People are ordering more sort of boxed lunches or bag lunches, or they're, I catered a wedding yesterday, and at the end of the buffet, we did a buffet. At the end of the buffet, before you started, the guests don't touch anything. They can't touch anything. Basically, we hand them a plate and silverware and a napkin, and they go through a buffet line, but it's all served by my staff. And the staff is in masks and they're in gloves, and everybody puts on a mask at the end of the buffet and sanitizes, and they hold their plate. We put masks in a cute little jug or container or basket, and everybody puts one on. Only one time, and that was yesterday, did somebody refuse to put on a mask to go through the buffet line. I said, I don't care what you do, you leave the buffet line. But when you're in the food, when you're with the food, you can't touch anything, and we don't want you breathing on anything. And the guy got really mad. His wife ended up making him a plate, but we are all seeing a lot of people right now, caterers. We're doing a lot of parties, but they're really a lot smaller. And we have to, it's not in my best interest for anybody to get sick. Let's put it that way. And I don't want to bring anything back to my 85-year-old mom, and nobody wants to bring anything back either. And we're seeing a lot of people. So it is interesting when people don't cooperate, but people are cooperating more. And so we have not just packaging of yourself, putting on a mask and sanitizing, but box lunches, bag lunches, modified buffets. We don't use a screen, but mostly everything is very, very, very sanitary, extremely sanitary. And 90% of our parties are completely outside. Now, yesterday it rained all morning, so we had to, you'll excuse me, I'm taking my mom to a doctor's appointment, so I'm in a hospital. People are going to have less choices, because if you're given a box lunch, you're given whatever's in that box lunch. Everybody's got to be on their best behavior. Let's put it that way.
Annabelle, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And check out my website, Annabel Cohen Cooks Detroit. And I have a Facebook page as well. And I often put down recipes, and I have a lot of photos and some other ideas. Anything that interests me ends up on my page.